This subject is only going to get more and more attention with time. Like the gender disparity, the birth rates, all of this is going to become more and more of a mainstream issue. In Japan and South Korea, they've been like mainstream issues that are just talked about widely for decades, you know? It'll happen here too. It'll happen everywhere, right? Everywhere that's affected by this. And I don't want only the far right to have like explanations for this. When people are talking about like legitimate, real economic and political problems caused by the birth rate decline, I don't want the only motherfuckers out there with a solution to be, you know, what if we did a white ethno-state? What if we were more misogynistic? What if rape were legal? You know, like, repeal the 19th, that's the moderate solution, you know? Like, these can't be the only people with opinions on the subject, right? We have to develop our opinions a little bit preemptively. I don't get the issue. I don't see why the population needs to increase forever. It doesn't need to increase forever. It does, however, need to, like, stabilize. You want the population to stabilize. You don't want it to start slipping back down. That would be quite bad. Especially because if it slips back down quickly, you get a very imbalanced population curve where the vast majority of people are old. And that's a real problem because old people drain more social resources, healthcare, blah, blah, blah. And it ends up placing a massive burden on the young, which makes it even harder for the young people to start new families, which kind of compounds the issue. But what is the slipping back down as part of stabilizing? It's not. I promise you it's not. We can just, like, level off. The slipping back down that we're describing is like actual social or civilizational collapse that could take centuries to recover from. The damage to your economy, to the infrastructure, that you would incur from like a massive population collapse is very, very, very difficult to deal with. With climate change and resource scarcity, shouldn't we lessen our population? Nah, I don't believe that bullshit. Listen, if climate change reduces our population, it'll be because of the fucking water wars or tsunamis or whatever. We should not, like, I promise you that population collapse will only make these problems more difficult, you know? You do not want to be dealing with climate change and climate refugee crises, and every single developed country is experiencing a simultaneous population collapse where 90% of the population is 40 years or older. You do not want to do all that at once. I don't know, Vaush, if there are less people, then less need to fight for resources. This isn't a Civ game. We don't fight over resources. We produce the resources. We're humans. We make the environment. We're not all fighting over berries falling from a bush or apples from a tree. We make the resources. Humans are needed to produce these things. In fact, the more productive capacity we have, the more we've addressed these scarcity arguments. Humans faced scarcity back when we were hunter-gatherer tribes. How many deer were there? How many bushes with berries were there? That was scarcity. Now we produce mega farms. We could feed the entire planet. We produce an enormous oversupply of food. We should be feeding more efficiently. But we only do that because of our immense productive capabilities, which we need to maintain. I don't think we can produce helium or oil. We do not need to experience global population collapse to preserve the supplies of helium or oil. What are you guys talking about? Why are you being contrarian with me? Why do we do this every time? Why are you all doing Thanos bullshit? Why are you all pretending these Malthusian fucking arguments where you're like, well, maybe the human population should be reduced to just 3 billion. That would be sufficient. Of course, I would be one of those 3 billion. Shut up. No. We know for a fact that population collapses are really, really, really destructive, okay? It's just a fact. It's a fact. It's not ideology. You don't need to argue with me over it. I just don't think we should enable or I guess, you know, allow the continuation of social trends that basically guarantee a global population collapse. It would be really destructive. I'm okay with the population, like, leveling off and decreasing a little bit over time, I guess, you know. But it would have to be a stabilized reduction, not a collapse. Collapses are different from reductions. No one but you is talking about population collapse. Reduction doesn't mean collapse. No, we're talking about collapse. You're reframing collapse as reduction because you're being difficult for no reason other than because, I don't know, you have nothing else to do right now. It's 1:20 p.m. PT on a Monday and you're not working. So I'm just going to assume that you have some leisure time to work with. But no, we're talking about population collapse. A reduction in population would be like maintaining a 1.9 children per woman birth rate over a century. That would reduce the population in a stable and sustainable fashion. A population collapse, where the birth rate spikes downward, the greater and greater percentage of the population is elderly, meaning more pressure is placed on the young people, so young people have even fewer children. That's a collapse. That's like over the course of a century, your population could reduce to like 1/3 of what it was, which is really bad. What do you think we should do? You people are fake sociologists. You know that? You don't begin with the end in mind. You have to approach the topic with an inquisitive mindset, you know? Even if I don't, so wait, your interest in examining the question is predicated on my having an answer? Me? Me specifically? You have to be curious about the question. You have to engage with it. Just wondering what your thoughts were? Um, there are some pretty obvious policies that you can implement, like free daycare or mandatory paternity leave that matches maternity leave. That would probably work to it to an extent. I feel like a society that encourages child rearing, to at least to some extent, is going to have like some gendered biases built into it, because there's just no getting around the fact that if you want every woman to have 2 kids, which means that for every woman who has one has to have three. For every woman who has zero, 2 others have to have one more, or one has to have four, etc. Like that's a lot of time spent having fucking cravings and weird poops, right? For the mom. There's always going to be that bias built in. I don't really know. We need to make being a parent cool again. I do unironically think there is like a walkable neighborhood argument to this as well. I think that people would probably be more interested in being parents if the world catered to parents more. Because like society does not cater to parents at all. Having a kid makes you like a 100% inconvenience to everyone, right? No one gives you any fucking leeway. When you bring them on a plane, everyone's bitching about it, you know? You bring them in a grocery store, everyone's bitching about it. It used to be there were kids everywhere. If you were growing up in like the 1960s, 70s, fucking there were kids everywhere. Every young adult was a parent, so they were all swapping tips and helping each other and so on and so forth. But now everyone's like so self-actualized and so obsessed with their own hobbies that it's like, well, a kid's just a big inconvenience you have to deal with for 18 years. I do worry if the fundamental problem is just there's too much interesting stuff to do. Like back in the 1960s, your shitty ass fucking grayscale TV has 3 channels. You can watch a movie down at the cinema for a nickel, I guess. I don't know. Like, why not have a kid? What the fuck are you doing? Reading? Fuck that. But now it's like you can play Uma Musume on your phone. You know, you've got Cookie Clicker. People are watching movies on their second monitor while playing EU5 on their primary monitor, and on their phone they've got like an idle game going. I wonder if people are just too caught up in their dopamine cycles to feel much, to feel the incentive, I guess, to have a kid, you know? And if that's the case, that might not be like a fixable problem normally. Because if you just made children socially unnecessary and vestigial, and then made life more interesting without kids, then I don't know how you incentivize people to have kids. Even if people like having kids. Maybe we do have to get rid of the internet.